It's all going to zero against Bitcoin.
It's going up forevermore.
You're against Bitcoin, you're against freedom.
I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's
Really?
gone up. I mean, look at it. We're creating now a market that has more liquidity, more transparency, and I'm pleasantly surprised, and I would never have predicted it before we filed it, that we were going to see this type of retail demand.
So you thought you'd do good, but not this good.
I thought, yes. Yes,
well, IBIT is your ETF over at iShares.
Yes.
It's about to overtake Grayscale, which was in the business certainly a lot longer. You look at the gains since January 11th when it first came about.
Yes.
Have you ever seen this much inflow this quickly into
IBIT is the fastest growing ETF in the history of ETFs.
Yo, welcome to Simply Bitcoin Live, your number one source for the peaceful Bitcoin revolution, crypto news, culture, matic warfare. Will be your guide through the separation of money and state. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Simply Bitcoin, the most watched daily Bitcoin only live show on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Sit back, relax. It's going to be a hell of a show today. So, they're saying the quiet part. I mean, you have Larry Fink, right? The chairman of the largest asset manager in the world, literally saying that the Bitcoin ETFs have been the best performing ETF period in the history of ETFs. And also the anchor was asking him, like, you guys are about to overtake Grayscale. It happened. Also, we covered this on yesterday's episode. The ETFs now hold a combined 1 million Bitcoin. I think Saylor coined a term calling it one Nakamoto, which is pretty crazy. But it's important to remember also, and we have the data for you guys today, that the vast majority of Bitcoin is still held by individuals. It's estimated roughly 11 million Bitcoin. So, I mean, absolutely huge. I think this is a testament to Bitcoin's incentives. You had another publicly traded company on the NASDAQ announced yesterday that it was going to adopt a Bitcoin strategy, of course, following in the footsteps of Michael Saylor. The stock went on to pump 30%. That is the Bitcoin effect. Also, you have multiple countries all over the world, including the Kingdom of Bhutan, Kenya, and El Salvador, all are mining Bitcoin. Kenya teamed up with Marathon, the publicly traded miner, and the Kingdom of Bhutan was covertly mining Bitcoin with the company BitDeer, and they just increased their investment in the small kingdom in Asia, in the Himalayas. So this is Bitcoin's incentives. This is the game theory playing out. Mind you, 5 years ago, Larry Fink was quoted saying that Bitcoin is an index of money laundering. What changed in 5 years? Well, nothing has changed. Bitcoin's incentives are doing what Bitcoin's incentives do best. And, everyone's kind of in a predicament. Fiat forces, whether it's institutions, individuals, to become part-time investors just to maintain their purchasing power. Bonds are terrible. Holding fiat is like holding a melting ice cube. Now they found Bitcoin and they're like, holy cow, we might be onto something. So I think that this cycle is going to be absolutely massive. I think we all kind of feel it. I think a lot of us have PTSD from the 2020, 2021 cycle where the China ban, I think, kind of cut it short. Also the rehypothecation by FTX and all that. So, a lot of us we have PTSD and we just can't believe it. But if you actually pay attention to what's going on in the sidelines, right? Back when Bitcoin was hitting these all-time high prices of 69K back in 2021, none of these things were true. Michael Saylor's Bitcoin strategy wasn't proven yet at that point. The hash rate was lower. You didn't have countries and publicly announcing that they were mining Bitcoin. So yes, we're heading into uncharted territory as the world wakes up to the fact that Bitcoin is the superior asset with superior incentives. Also, another other news, it seems like there's a bit of a consolidation going on in regards to some of the public miners. Riot Platforms acquires a 9.25% stake in Bitfarms following a rejected offer of $950 million. So we'll talk about that. The centralization of mining, is it a big deal? I mean, there's one mining pool called Foundry that accounts for 29.82% of the hash rate. Is that a problem? I don't know. We'll see. But we do have a very special guest and a Bitcoin OG to talk about that today. He is also the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada. Of course, I'm about Dave Bradley. He's also a board member of Bitcoin Well and co-founder of Bull Bitcoin. Dave, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it, man. I mean, look, real quick, could you have imagined since the early days that Bitcoin, would come to these, like, would come to this point where there's presidents talking about it, dropping it in, campaign speeches and all that?
Yeah, it's pretty wild because there was a point where it was like just me in the Bitcoin industry in Western Canada. And I was meeting people at Tim Hortons, and I had a moment like going to that Miami 2021 conference when everybody was like so happy the world was opening back up, and there's tens of thousands of people there. It was just like, holy shit, like this is very different than it used to be. The current stuff, like the government's getting in, doesn't really excite me. The bankers getting it doesn't really excite me. They're kind of like the inevitable, slightly less dumb money that's getting in.
Yeah, and let me ask you about that. So, yeah, but we have the saying in Bitcoin, which is Bitcoin is the money of enemies, right? So you can make the argument that this was an eventuality, right? So it's now large institutions, asset managers. You have small nation states. I think the last domino to fall, whether that was on purpose or not, or the central banks basically saying, you know what, this gold, this shiny metal, perhaps maybe it's not a good idea to hold on to it. Maybe this Bitcoin thing looks pretty good.
Yeah, and I mean, gold isn't really that important of a tool right now in the global monetary system. I wouldn't say. Like, I don't think people are out there being like, you know what, I'm going to evaluate my currency choice based on their gold reserves. It's really about spending power and being able to maintain that. And in the world that we're in right now, like even maintaining relatively short-term spending power is what I think most people are prioritizing. And so most people are going to continue to use whatever their local currency is until it collapses. And then they'll use whatever the next most spendable local currency would be. In most cases, that's going to be the US dollar. But that's not because they're like, hey, I heard the US has a lot of gold allegedly, so we trust that the dollar will be backed by something, right? So I think all of these currencies are really backed by nothing more than promises at this point. And at a certain point, we might see fiat currencies get into a game where they're starting to compete based on what they're backed by. They might start talking about gold reserves. They might actually back a currency by gold again, or they might go to Bitcoin, obviously, which would be the right choice rationally for the country that they're managing. But yeah, I mean, I think we're just starting to see a little tip of awareness in that area. We've got, for example, a credit union here in Alberta called Bow Valley Credit Union that we're big supporters of, that has started to put gold on the balance sheet of the bank, just with the idea that, like, hey, they fully expect this whole thing could collapse someday, and they want to make sure that their depositors have more than nothing.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think you're starting to see that, right? Like, so El Salvador made their reserves public, right? And the comparison that I always make is like, you have the famous Fort Knox in the US, where there literally hasn't been a video of the inside of a vault, and when they did do like a video or a picture of that, they only showed one vault of the entire thing. And the last time that happened was like in the 1970s, in like 1974. So to kind of add to what you're saying, I think you're going to see like the countries that most benefit from their strong fiat currencies be the last to the party, in my opinion, because they're going to want to hold on to that power of being able to just create money for free that everyone else has to work for. But what I got to say is anyone who criticizes El Salvador about how they do things, they got to shut the F up, because until they make their reserves public, they're absolute LARPers. Like, it's a LARP. It's a joke.
Yeah. And I think your point about, which currencies will, or which countries will adopt it first is a good one. And El Salvador, because they don't have their own currency, they're already in a spot where they don't have the tool of money printing to shore up their weak fiscal decisions, right? And that's really what most of these countries are clinging to, is the ability to print money in order to spend money. And we've gotten to this point where, government spending pretty much everywhere in the world is so vastly unsustainable that, they're just trying to spend as much money as they can to stay in power as long as they can at this point. And
100%.
One by one, every country in the world is going to lose that ability to print their own currency to spend it. And it's definitely going to be the weaker currencies that go first. And then once they've lost that ability, Bitcoin starts to look a lot more impressive as sort of like a savings tool, which is really what it is. And it should be a savings tool at the country level too.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with that. I agree with that. I agree with that 100%, because they're incentivized to look for alternatives versus, what's crazy is like the US, where like they sell, the Bitcoin that they seized from, the Silk Road and all that, they sell it for dollars. So they sell Bitcoin for something that they could just create out of thin air, which I think is just like it's an example of how clown world fiat world is. Like it's just absolutely insane. Also, Opti survived the storm. He's with us today. I didn't know this because Opti stoic in a way sometimes, but apparently there's a huge storm that hit his city, and like how many people lost power, bro?
Yeah, so there was a huge thunderstorm, 80-mile-per-hour winds last night, 2 days ago in Dallas. Woke up to tornado warnings and everything, and apparently there's potentially, I haven't updated this, but there might be 500,000 people still out of electricity at this point. But yeah, my electricity got back at 2 yesterday. So hey, sorry guys, rug pulled on the show, but there was a couple of things outside of my control. So at least I'm here. Waking up to tornado sirens is not fun. But Nico, I did make it to the 1000th Simply Bitcoin episode. We only got another 1,000 or 1,100 to catch up to Joe Rogan. But hey, we're at 1,000 Simply Bitcoin episodes. It's absolutely incredible. Man, it's been a good run. Still got another couple thousand in us, I hope. It's been a good run, and the best is yet to come. Anyways, I do also want to mention, dude, you made it to the 1,000 episode, but you missed the episode where president of Bitcoin Magazine, Mike Germano, joined us yesterday, announcing that Simply Bitcoin. I was in the chat. Is going to be taking over the news desk for a couple hours at the Bitcoin conference at Bitcoin 2024. But you did make the 1,000th episode, so it's Hey, I guess God just didn't want me to be there when Mike Germano was blowing my ego up,
Sent a storm. But we had Rustin in the co-host seat, so oh my God, someone's already mentioning celebrate the 1069th episode. Of course, the chat is back today. Anyways, guys, we have a hell of a show lined up for you guys, but before we get to it, I do want to give a extremely special shout out to our lead sponsor, and of course, I'm talking about the best place to build your automatic self-custody Bitcoin stack, bitcoinwell.com. It's a publicly traded company coming out of Canada that recently expanded to all 50 US states. It is self-custody by default, future-proof your money with self-custody by default. What does that mean? That means you can't buy Bitcoin on Bitcoin Well unless you're going to take self-custody. You have to put an address, and as soon as your funds clear, it automatically withdraws from the platform directly to your self-custody Bitcoin wallet, which perfectly aligns with the Simply Bitcoin ethos of the separation of money and state, because after all, self-custody is Bitcoin revolution. Go check out their website at bitcoinwell.com. Buy real Bitcoin. Enable your independence with the fastest and safest way to buy Bitcoin in Canada and the USA. To get started, all you got to do is you put in your email. The whole process literally takes a couple of minutes. It's a clear 1% spread. Obviously, it's Bitcoin only, and it's non-custodial, empowering individual ownership with free automatic self-custody. And for Bitcoin Well customers in Canada, buy Bitcoin with cash vouchers. Privacy preservation at its finest. Load up on Bitcoin by financing your Lite account with cash at one of our many Bitcoin ATMs. Buy up to $3K per day. Wink, wink. Only an email address is required. And also check out their new product that just released, which is this awesome feature where you can instantly sell using the Lightning Network. There's a Lightning address. You send some sats, it automatically sells them to you, and it literally just deposits money into your bank account directly. You can do this all via Lightning. You don't have to go through the platform or anything. It's incredibly awesome. So if you're a customer of Bitcoin Well in Canada, check out the cash vouchers, check out the instant sell using Lightning. All those features just went live. Guys, check out Bitcoin Well, support self-custody by default Bitcoin on-ramps. The only one being Bitcoin Well. All right, everybody, let's move on to the numbers. Lots to talk about today. Let's check it out. Here we go.
The Bitcoin numbers.
Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Is your seed phrase really secure? Stamp Seed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you need to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them on paper. Don't store your generational wealth on paper. Paper is prone to water damage, fire damage. You want to put your generational wealth on one of the strongest metals on planet Earth, titanium. Your words are actually stamped into this metal plate with this hammer and these letter stamps. And once your words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamped seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. All things that paper is not, allowing you to hodl your Bitcoin with peace of mind for the long haul. Stamp your seed on Stamp Seed. Alrighty, I made it incredibly easy for you guys. You could scan the QR code or check the link in the video description to get yourself a titanium stamp seed storage kit, so you don't have to explain to your grandchildren why you lost your generational wealth because you decided to store your Bitcoin seed words on paper. Don't do that. Stamp them on freaking titanium. Stamp Seed, promo code simply. At the time of recording, the Bitcoin price is $67,470. Sats per dollar, 1,482. Block height, 845,663. Blocks to halving, 204,337. Halving estimate March 22nd, 2028. Total Lightning Network capacity, 4,656 Bitcoin capacity value, 314 million US dollars. Realized monetary inflation, 1.63%. The market capitalization of Bitcoin currently sitting at 1.33 trillion. Bitcoin versus gold market cap, 8.24%. In the grand scheme of things, we are just getting started. Anyways, I saw this video dropped by Pomp here. He is, again, we always talk about the concept of the Bitcoin echo chamber. Us Bitcoin content creators, we make content for other Bitcoiners, right? How do we break the echo chamber? Well, you know, you go on legacy media, you have these types of interviews. Charles Payne has done an incredible job. He's been a Bitcoin advocate. Natalie Burnell has absolutely slayed it when she's gone on his show as well. So this is important because this is normies, right? Normies are watching Fox Business, right? So normies get exposure to Bitcoin. You know, that's why it's so important when, that's why I started with the cold open of Larry Fink on the legacy financial media, or when, you know, Pomp does these types of interviews on Fox Business, or when Natalie Burnell goes on Fox Business, or when, you know, Jack Mallers goes on Bloomberg, right? That really moves the needle. Because these are people that haven't heard the things that us Bitcoiners have heard millions of times, right? They're getting kind of exposed to these ideas. Anyways, so here's Pomp on Fox Business, and he's talking about a couple of things. Let's check it out, and then we'll talk about it.
All right, move over Bitcoin. Here comes Ethereum. That's right. In the past month, Ethereum
terrible.
has rallied more than 17% versus 6.5% for Bitcoin. The question is, what's driving it, and where does it go from here? Had to bring in Pomp Investments investor Anthony Pompliano. And Pomp, what the heck is going on now? By the way, I did read, I think it was last week, you had a headline. It sounded a little ominous about these Ethereum ETFs. Are you a fan or not?
Well, I think that Wall Street's just woken up to the fact that they can make money in this sector now, right? If you look back 3, 4, 5 years ago, they were all saying, we don't like Bitcoin, we don't like crypto. Right. Now they realize there's profits here. And so they're going to continue to push not only to get the Bitcoin ETFs, Ethereum ETFs, but they're going to try to go through this full stack. And the question is, what will regulators allow? How many are they going to approve? How many coins are going to be on Wall Street by the end of this year?
Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like you don't want too many. You don't want some of the lower end coins. Well,
just think Bitcoin, I think, is this unique thing that has a very clean story, right? It's a store of value. When you get into these other things, they're technology platforms. So now you start talking about what's the difference between Facebook, Amazon, Google, et cetera. They're all competing for different kind of aspects of the consumer. And so I think when you look at Ethereum, Solana, and many others, they're tech platforms competing with each other. And so the story just isn't as clean as Bitcoin exclusively.
Something else has changed here in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Former President Trump has really been like, hey, I'm down. I like Bitcoin. And I feel like a lot of Democrats, not necessarily the president himself, but a lot of Democrats are starting to change their tune a little bit, maybe fearful of losing that young vote.
There's 50 plus million Americans that hold these assets. And so if you're going to basically concede the fact that the Republican Party is going to be pro-crypto and you're going to take an anti-crypto stance, you can kiss those 50 million votes goodbye, most likely. People for centuries have been voting with their pocket. Who is best for what I can do financially? And crypto is just the latest manifestation of that. And so I think that Trump really changed the game. He forced the hand of politicians on both sides of the aisle. If you don't embrace this, you are now setting yourself up to be in the crosshairs of these crypto voters. And I think that people finally realize not only are they passionate, it's a large group, and they're willing to go out to the ballot box, and that's going to change how politicians treat this asset class.
Got less than 30 seconds ago. Speaking of adoption, another company is making this their key treasury asset.
Look, Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy pioneered this. There's now, 5 different companies around the world that I'm aware of. I always say that 1 does it, it's a dot. 2, it's a line. 3, it's a trend. And so I think that we're going to see many, many more do this over the coming years.
I got to tell you, Saylor, I mean, you have to tip your hat to him.
He did a fantastic job.
Do. He's done a fantastic job. He put his money where his mouth is, really, and it's worked out so far pretty good for him.
Made a couple $1 billion.
Couple. All right. Soon he'll catch you, my man. Talk to you again real soon.
All right. Before I get a reaction to everyone, I do want to give a very special shout out to the super chat. Josh, thank you so much for the $100. He said 1000th episode. Let's go. We are winning. Really, really appreciate the support, Josh. Okay. Quick observation here. And I'm gonna mention Saylor as well because I saw the Peter McCormack episode. I find it a little bit interesting that all of a sudden, people. I find it interesting that someone like Saylor and someone like Pomp that have been many, many times gone on air publicly said they're Bitcoin only, or they support Bitcoin, specifically Saylor, and all of a sudden they're changing tune in regards to these other shitcoins becoming ETFs now that the regulatory environment changed because of the political situation. Make no mistake, I think Mahler's had a different theory. Was it that, and I think Pomp, I heard him say the same thing, that it's like Wall Street is realizing that this is another way to make money. But I truly believe it was the political situation. And exactly what Pomp said about the 50 million voters. It's a huge demographic that they can potentially lose, the Democratic Party. This is an election year in November, that they could potentially lose because they're taking an anti-Bitcoin stance, right? So it's almost as if they're kind of placating a little bit. And I think that's one of the reasons that they let, this Ethereum ETF go in, right? Doesn't pass the Howey test. Right. The vast majority of the supply is still held on by the foundation. They can change the monetary policy. They've done it multiple times. They've rolled back the chain. They've done whatever they wanted. Right. You can't do that with Bitcoin. That's really what separates Bitcoin from the rest. But I'm hearing similar words from Pomp and I'm hearing similar words from Saylor, which is they're just saying, oh, these are just technology plays all of a sudden. No, they're shitcoin plays all of a sudden. I don't see, what does Ethereum do? What is its value proposition? I have absolutely no idea what it is. I don't know what it does. Like, look, Amazon, I could tell you what it does. Tesla, I could tell you what it does. Facebook, even though it's terrible, I could tell you what it does, right? What does Ethereum do? What is its value proposition? I have no idea, right? But the change in tune is interesting. And I think the one that caught me off guard the most is Saylor's change in tune, right? He went from there was going to be no Ethereum ETFs. I mean, there was going to be no other shit coins that were going to become ETFs. And then all of a sudden, when it was approved, he was like, yeah, you know, it's a technology and this and that. Like, I find that interesting. Okay, one last point, and then I'll pass it on to Dave. Is I'm a libertarian. I'm a capitalist. At the end of the day, I don't. It would be a weird perspective from a Bitcoiner saying that you'd want the government to step in and give you some type of special advantage. I think Bitcoin's incentives are going to rule the day. It doesn't need any type of special privileges or anything. It is the superior asset. It is going to win. It doesn't need an ETF. Maybe that's an unpopular opinion these days. But I do find it interesting that you have this change in tune all of a sudden now that the Ethereum ETF is approved. Anyways, Dave, I said this in the beginning. You've been here a while, man. You've seen things, the fork wars, you know, a lot of uncertainty in the early days of Bitcoin. Is this just more noise? Like, is this just more bullshit in Bitcoin's history?
Yeah, and over many years, I have figured out the use case for Ethereum. Ethereum is very useful at providing a user base of people who are easily fooled by technobabble and have a high risk tolerance. And so Ethereum is going to continue to be popular for the same reason that, any kind of like fantasy football is popular. It's a gambling platform. It's a gambling platform where people build things to gamble on, and it's a gambling platform where, people gamble on the main token, of course, itself, right? And so this framing of like these are just tech platforms is unhelpful to the listeners for sure of those programs, but probably helpful to the world as a whole because everyone gets Bitcoin when they deserve to, and I think. I think that is what we're going to see is that hopefully those Ethereum ETFs are going to distract the bankers and the central banks and the last people that we want holding Bitcoin when this all shakes out are going to be the people that are most easily fooled by the Bitcoin ETF. And I think when we're talking about Ethereum as a tech platform, or to your point, you can tell me what Amazon does. Not only can you tell us what it does, but when you own Amazon stock, you actually have rights. You have shares in the company, you own a part of the company. And that's not true when you own Ether. You don't own anything. The Ethereum Foundation, which is a company that issued this security, doesn't owe you anything other than the right to use their tools. So it's more like pre-buying a gift card for a company that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, and man, that was beautifully put. I completely agree. Right? It's just gambling. It's just I like, what does it do? No one knows. But put it in. If they approve a Solana ETF, I mean, it's just a testament to how corrupted the system is. Like they're not following their own rules anymore. It's just like, but it's fiat system, right? And I think a lot of Bitcoiners are naive to think that the same system that is locking, some members of the Bitcoin community in a box for writing code, is going to come out and do the moral thing. Like I think the laws themselves are suffering from inflation, right? So anyways, Opti, what's your take on this? Also, I see Yellow is in the chat. Shout out Yellow. Opti, what's your take on all this, brother?
Yeah, well, I think, kind of echoing what Dave was saying, I like to quote safety in here. The use case of Ethereum is it's the mother asshole, which all shitcoins come from. So, that's where we're at right now. But I mean, I'm doubling down on this. I've been saying for a minute, and you guys can call me a shitcoiner all you want, but I think the SEC needs to approve all the shitcoin ETFs so that they don't pick winners and losers, so that people can get absolutely wrecked out there if they want to get greedy and put their money in this garbage. So Gary, I'm calling on you right now. Approve all the shitcoin ETFs so that Bitcoin can very clearly show that it is the only thing that is the true winner out here. And if you want to be greedy, you want to, play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. And I'm really, really excited excited to see these shitcoin ETFs wreck Wall Street, kind of as Dave was saying, echoing the same thing, that the people that are the most greedy, the ones that want to gamble, the ones that are very easily distracted by the techno babble just get absolutely wrecked. And anyone that really knows what's going on, aka every single one of you guys out there that watches the show constantly, knows that all you really need to do is just stack sats, take it into custody, work on your cash flow, and chill while everyone out there continues to play fiat gambling games. They get absolutely devastated, and we store the best money in the world. Like, what could be a better outcome than seeing Wall Street get absolutely devastated because of these shitcoin ETFs, and we're just acquiring as much Bitcoin as possible, and it's just going to be a beautiful game. So I want them all approved at this point, Nico. I want them all approved. Do not pick the winners and losers. But no, I also, like, kind of seriously, it does seem like I've been saying this probably for like a year, where we were looking on the horizon and saying, like, Bitcoin is finally starting to enter the mainstream consciousness. It's starting to enter the mainstream conversation. And now it very clearly is, I think, maybe not like the darling of the ball yet, but it's in the mainstream conversation. We have basically traditional legacy media talking heads be Bitcoin maxis, and now people are taking what we're saying seriously, versus before they were just laughing at us and haha, your internet money is cool and all, but like, I'm not going to buy anything. And now every asset manager in the world's like, wait, I actually have to take Bitcoin seriously. And it's just beautiful to see. And I'm sure this is only going to go up in the future, or rather in the short term, because I think by the end of the year, where things are going to get really crazy. So I think the conversation is maturing, at least in the public eye. But for all of us here, it's like nothing new. It's like, okay, we're at the point in the cycle where Pomp goes on television, talks about Bitcoin. Like, okay, like let's get the number rolling so that everyone knows what's going on here. And it's just like, okay, we've seen this before. Like, let's get to the end of the year when the price starts going nuclear.
Amen to that. Amen to that. All right, everybody, before we move on to the next block, I do want to give a extremely special shout out to our sponsor. And of course, I'm talking about the Pleb Party in Nashville. If you're going to the Bitcoin 2024 conference, you definitely don't want to miss the Bitcoin Pleb Party. It's going to be hosted the day before the largest Bitcoin conference ever, the largest Bitcoin conference in the US, Thursday, July 25th. It's a 12-hour open bar from noon to midnight. Pleb Party in Nashville. The Pleb Party in Miami was sold out 8 days before, so you want to get your tickets quickly before they sell out. Confirmed attendees include Larry Lepard, Preston Pish, the entire Simply Bitcoin crew, James Lavish, Robert Breedlove, Mark Moss, Pubby, Tatum Turnup, Adam O'Brien. Amazing. It's going to be, Dave, are you going to be in Nashville?
I haven't decided.
Oh,
I lean towards no, but I got a lot of travel.
So Dave might be at the party. It's going to be hosted at an amazing venue, a rustic automobile factory from 1910 with brick walls and tons of proof of work atmosphere. Over 1,000 Bitcoin plebs are expected to attend. There's only roughly, I think, like 50 tickets left at the $200 price point. The prices do go up as time goes by. So get your tickets quickly, scan the QR code, or check the link in the video description. All right, everybody, let's move on to the daily news.
The Daily News.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, Foundation Devices. It's self-custody done right. They built a premium grade hardware wallet called Passport right here in the US. It's fully open source and verifiable. It's the most intuitive Bitcoin wallet designed with a UX reminiscent of a simple feature phone. So you will know how to navigate it and use it the moment you pick it up. Get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own hands in just a few minutes. Experience the peace of mind that comes with taking ownership of your own keys. After a massive sellout during Bitcoin Miami 2023, the Passport is back in stock at foundationdevices.com. Bitcoin only, open source verifiable, completely air-gapped security model, gorgeous design craft, premium grade materials. If you're thinking about getting your Bitcoin off exchanges, this is the one for you. Check out the Passport link in the show notes below to learn more. Everybody, you want to make it over the finish line. with your generational wealth, which is why you want to get yourself a Bitcoin hardware wallet. And of course, we recommend our sponsor, Passport by Foundation Devices. It's incredibly easy to use. You could pair it up with the Envoy app. And it makes spending cold storage Bitcoin incredibly easy. It's intuitive. Just get yourself a Passport by Foundation Devices. And also, you could it's completely air gapped. You pair it up with your phone. Like, guys, it's dope. Get it. Passport by Foundation Devices. I personally use it. All right, everybody. So let's talk about today's news. Bitcoin ETFs see significant inflow, surpass 1 million held. I mean, this is something that we talked about yesterday, the amount of Bitcoin that these institutions are holding. Also, something that we didn't cover last week, but the Greyscale CEO, I can't pronounce that last name. I apologize, guys. Michael Sonnenschein steps down to be replaced by TradFi veteran. And I wonder why that was. I wonder why that is. I mean, the anchor on the legacy financial media in the cold opening kind of hinted to it, and it finally happened. This is what I wanted to talk about today. BlackRock's $20 billion ETF overtakes Grayscale, now world's largest Bitcoin fund. BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF has become the world's largest fund for the original cryptocurrency, amassing almost $20 billion in total assets since listing in the US. The exchange-traded fund held $19.68 billion of the token on May 28th, dethroning the $19.65 billion Greyscale Bitcoin Trust, data compiled by Bloomberg shows. The third largest is the $11.1 billion offering from Fidelity. The BlackRock and Fidelity Bitcoin ETFs were among 9 that debuted on January 11th, the same day that the more than decade-old Greyscale vehicle converted into an ETF. The launches were a watershed moment for crypto, making Bitcoin more accessible to investors, spurring a rally in the token to a record $73,798. The BlackRock Bitcoin Trust has attracted the greatest inflow since going live, $16.5 million, while investors have pulled $17.7 billion from Greyscale Fund over the same period. The latter's higher fees and exits by arbitrators have been cited as possible drivers of outflows. Neither BlackRock nor Greyscale investments immediately replied to requests for comment outside regular U.S. business hours. Greyscale intends to launch a clone of its main fund, according to a March regulatory filing, and fees are expected to be lower, a person familiar with the matter said at the time. So another thing that I wanted to cover as well, because I think this is important, 1 million Bitcoin is definitely a lot of Bitcoin. I don't know. I mean, Dave, I'll ask you, what do you think about the name that Saylor coined for it? 1 million Bitcoin is one Nakamoto. Do you like it, dislike it?
Yeah, I think I like it. It's probably not something we're going to refer to very often.
Yeah, I completely agree. Definitely not. It's like, man, he has one Nakamoto. Oh, man. Okay. So I love this graphic by River. It's something that we've used before on the show, and it kind of does a breakdown of like who owns what, right? So miners, they own roughly 700 Bitcoin. Satoshi, this is why it's called one Nakamoto, owns roughly 1.1 million Bitcoin. Lost Bitcoin by estimation, roughly 3.7 million. And then individuals hold 11.97 million. Businesses, roughly 800,000 Bitcoin. ETFs, now they hold 1 million Bitcoin. Governments, 500,000 Bitcoin. And to be mined, 1.38 million Bitcoin. I got to be honest with you guys. This is dope. Like, the fact that the ETFs hold less Bitcoin than individuals, the fact that governments hold less Bitcoin than individuals, the fact that businesses hold less Bitcoin than individuals, I think that's a really, really, really good thing. And I think that's just a testament to how, Bitcoin was created. It's a grassroots movement. Satoshi didn't just email Goldman Sachs and all these people, and say, hey, I'm launching something new. I don't think they would have bought it anyways. It was a grassroots movement from the bottom up. And that's why the majority of Bitcoin is held by individuals. So I think that's a really positive thing. And I also want to show this chart as a warning for anybody watching the show. If you sell your Bitcoin right now, you're either selling it to Larry Fink, the government, or a business. Don't do that. Hold on to your Bitcoin. Definitely don't do that. Don't give away your power. Don't give away your sweet, sweet Satoshis. So, Dave, I mean, brother, like I said, you've been here from the very, very beginning. What's your take on all this, man? Is it just going to keep on going? Who's selling all this Bitcoin to everyone? Why is the price still at where it was in 2021? Like, if they're buying all this Bitcoin, why hasn't the price pumped? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly care why the price hasn't pumped in the short term here. People are selling because they have things that they need to pay for, and anybody who's not selling Bitcoin right now already had too many dollars in the first place, right? So it's kind of an inevitability that if you're really all in on Bitcoin, you're going to sell, right? Because you got to pay for your life. But I think ultimately that chart that you showed is pretty interesting, because we're going to be in a spot very soon where everyone's going to have to start making that choice of like, do I sell my Bitcoin to the government for something that they can just print? Right? And that's the part that makes really no sense at all. And if the governments really knew what Bitcoin was, if they realized what an existential threat it is to the even future existence of the concept of a nation state or a government, certainly to the idea that like a massive portion of the resources created by a society can be allocated by a small group of centralized people for their own benefit, the fact that Bitcoin destroys that idea would be very threatening to them. And they haven't yet realized that. And if they had, the most logical thing that they could do would be to print as much of the free money that they can print and exchange it for as much Bitcoin as possible. And I think we're going to get to a point where they expressly realize that at some point. And we've probably all heard the saying like gradually then suddenly. And when one government starts printing as much money as they can to buy as much Bitcoin as they can, all the rest of them kind of have to follow or be left in the dust. And at that point, that's the suddenly. I think that's where we're going to go from like, people adopting Bitcoin as an investment or a way to save their purchasing power to the majority of the world adopting Bitcoin so that they don't starve to death.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a really good point. And it kind of, when you were saying that, it reminds me of like this very famous meme. And I know you know what I'm going to be talking about, Dave, but the one with Neo and Morpheus, which is like, so you're telling me, Morpheus, that, one day I won't have to sell my Bitcoin. And then Morpheus is like, yes, precisely, Neo, because you'll be able to use it. Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to I think it's going to be a very kind of, what do you think, Dave? Do you think it's going to be like a progressive thing that happens over time? Or do you think one day, there's just kind of this mass realization by, a big portion of the population that's like, wow, the money that we're using is fake, right? Because that's the definition of hyperinflation for everybody, by the way. Hyperinflation doesn't happen just because they print this excessive amount of money, but it's just there's a critical mass of the population that just loses faith in the currency completely, and that's when it hyperinflates, right? So do you foresee that happening in the future, kind of on a massive scale? I think it's unimaginable at this point, but I mean, it was unimaginable that you could made the same argument that it was unimaginable that you would have a presidential candidate saying what he was saying. You could have made the argument that it was unimaginable that Larry Fink was going to be, talking the Bitcoin talk on legacy financial media. You could have said it was unimaginable that, Bitcoin would become legal tender of a country. You could make all these arguments. So is it really that unimaginable that, we'll get to one day where people just don't want dollars anymore? They don't want Canadian dollars. They don't want pesos. They just want real money, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you completely fucked up that meme as you were trying to describe it. you missed like one of two panels. But
Opti, can you pull it up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing it off the top of my head. So, but yeah. The point that, but it was it was accomplished what I was trying to do, right? Yeah, which is you knew what meme I was talking about.
Yeah, I did. So I think what we're gonna see out of the next and I don't know how long this will take, maybe somewhere between 5 and 20 years, is a period of really aggressive currency competition around the world. And see, there we go.
Yeah.
Someday you won't have to. Yeah.
Yeah, so for audio listeners, the meme is, because I totally butchered it, Dave's absolutely right. The meme is Neo saying, "What are you trying to tell me? That I can trade my Bitcoin for millions someday?" And Morpheus says, "No, Neo, I'm trying to tell you that when you're ready, you won't have to." Anyways, Dave?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what we're heading towards. But I think what we're going to see first is a period where a lot of the weaker currencies in the world start to come under real pressure. And we're already seeing that in places like, obviously Venezuela, Zimbabwe, but there's a lot more countries like Argentina, Lebanon, Turkey, almost all of them really, that are like very close to that cliff. And I like the metaphor of like Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner. And there's this moment where the Roadrunner zips across the canyon and Wile E. Coyote runs out there, and then he hangs for a moment in midair after he realizes that he has run off of a cliff. And I think that's where a lot of the currencies are in the world, is they're already off the cliff. It's already too late. And they're just hanging there for a moment. And, they haven't yet realized that they're subject to the forces of reality, gravity or money supply. And so we're going to see a lot more countries in the world who've been using this ability to print money as a way to sustain their ability to spend money. And, they're going to lose that ability because they're going to reach that point of hyperinflation. These countries are going to have to pick another currency. And in a lot of cases, the currency that they pick is going to be the US dollar, or some other regionally competitive currency like the euro or the yuan, or just a small list of currencies that I think will survive. And eventually, one of those countries is going to pick Bitcoin as their currency. They're going to pick Bitcoin not only as the backing for their currency, but as the denomination of their currency. And whichever country does that will probably be permanently the richest country in the world. And
do you think
that's,
go ahead.
That's where the gradually then suddenly begins, I think.
Absolutely. Do you think that country is El Salvador, Dave?
No.
Why? It just like, what's your thought process there?
Well, so El Salvador is on the US dollar, right? So they've for a long time not had the ability to do that. They haven't been able to print money to spend money. And that's partly why they've been one of the poorest countries in the world for a long time. So I think that El Salvador is going to benefit tremendously from the fact that they've bought Bitcoin and that they're holding Bitcoin. And that's going to be the biggest benefit to the country of El Salvador. I don't know that, making it legal tender, like that's the exact opposite of Bitcoin, right? Like we don't need permission from the government to use Bitcoin. That's literally what legal tender is. We're the only currency in the world that doesn't care if it's legal tender, right? There are a bunch of risks that come with El Salvador. You've got an essential dictator in there that hopefully doesn't take the Bitcoins ever, but they are way ahead. So if the dictator turns out to be benevolent, which is probably the best form of government, and doesn't steal the Bitcoins, and they continue to accumulate Bitcoins, they have an advantage. They have a head start. But there's a bunch of countries in the world that could accumulate way more Bitcoins way more quickly if they decided to do that. And the real important move is not necessarily just saving a Bitcoin, it's turning your economy into a Bitcoin economy. And so being denominated in Bitcoin, they're probably a lot further away from that because their economy is already denominated in US dollars.
Gotcha. Yeah, man, it's fascinating. I remember you kind of remind me of this conversation that I had with Jeff Booth, Dave, which is like the countries that are farthest away from the benefit of being the world reserve currency, or being some of the reserve currencies, are just going to benefit from this the most. Like, I think that's really when the things are going to start to break a little bit. And I think, and it's already happened. Like if you take a look at Nigeria, right, you had these like crazy press releases coming out. Like they launched the e-Naira, no adoption, a lot of adoption of alternative currencies like Bitcoin, obviously, and then they threatened to lock the some of the company executives of Binance, which is one of the on ramps, and they were blaming the on ramp rather than them printing money. And I think it's kind of like a bit of a foreshadowing. I see that happening in other countries because these politicians that have this godlike power, the hubris is crazy. We saw a little bit of that in Canada with the Canadian truckers protests. You definitely see that in the US. Like, they're just completely disconnected from reality, completely. And I think they're just going to blame Bitcoin. It's not us that we're printing money. It's not the fact that, there's trillions of dollars unaccounted for, in military spending from the Pentagon. It has nothing to do with that. It's Bitcoin's fault. It's the Bitcoiners.
Yeah. And if you've read the book Atlas Shrugged, which everyone should read and no one should pretend that they've read, part of the nearing the end of the plot is that this villain that they've created, John Galt, is the one that's ruining the economy. And then they're like, actually, we should probably get this guy to run the economy, right? And so I think there's a parallel there in that they will 100% at some point blame Bitcoin, and there will be a much more violent than they fight you stage in a lot of countries in the world, where a lot of places will make Bitcoin illegal. A lot of places will try to make it legal to hold your own Bitcoin. And, we're all kind of in a race right now. We're in a race to like, how much Bitcoin can we get before everyone else? And, big companies like MicroStrategy have a huge advantage, but not as big of an advantage as a country that can print its own money. And so that's kind of the road that we're on right now. And I think if anything, those like the ETH ETFs are a positive because they distract the people that we don't want to win the race from the race. We don't want them to end up with the most Bitcoin. I'm not particularly worried about governments ending up with Bitcoin because at a certain point, they're going to run out of spending power of their own printable currency, and they're just going to spend the Bitcoin on all the stupid things that governments spend Bitcoin on anyway. I'm way more worried about the oligarchs and the plutocracy class accumulating more Bitcoin than most people. And I think the ETFs actually probably are a good safety measure to that, because in the end, ultimately, the governments are going to seize all the Bitcoins in the ETFs. That's a virtual certainty. And, most of the, as you say, like the asset managers of the world and all of the corporate interests that are holding their Bitcoin in custodians and in the state of New York are ultimately going to find out, what self-custody means and why it's important. And from there, it'll just get redistributed through capitalism.
Absolutely. I do want to give this shout out to the super chat. Dr. Sauce, thank you for the $20. This one is for the Roadrunner. So Dave, I'm going to move the Overton window, which we do ever so slightly on Simply Bitcoin. We inch it over. And I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. I think it's extremely important that Bitcoiners get into positions of power and influence. If this is the route that we're going down, I think that's extremely important. And I think that's lost on some Bitcoiners. But we're heading, because if not, then, like, like it's either the Bitcoiners in positions of power and influence, or it's non-Bitcoiners in positions. Imagine Vitalik in a position of power and influence. Like, that would be horrific, in my opinion. So I really believe, I think that's what we're going to see in the next, 5, 10, 15 years, in my opinion, just based on, what you're saying. And I'm just kind of building a mental map in my head of like what the future roadmap is. Yeah, we need Bitcoiners in positions of power and influence for sure.
I agree with you, but I don't think that's going to happen because of the same reason that you don't get smart people running for office, right? It's like I don't want to be in charge. Like, I don't know anybody who wants to be in charge meaningfully of other people at scale. Like, it's a weird thing to want. It's a weird thing to think like, hey, I should have power over a bunch of other people's decisions, and I should be able to allocate some of the resources that they create with their time as I see fit. And that's completely at odds with the idea of Bitcoin. And so I think necessarily a lot of Bitcoiners are very anti-political. Like, we don't trust governments. We don't trust political parties. I think what Trump did was a genius move in that he found like a single button that could bring in all the people. And you've seen this all over Twitter. All these people who are like, I would have never voted, but now I'm interested in voting because of this one thing. right? And I think most Bitcoiners would probably vote for something to the akin of, something along the lines of like, we would like the government to leave us alone a lot more, right? And that kind of policy is very at odds generally with what the kind of people who decide that they should be in charge think they should do, right? There's this giant fallacy that is really guiding a lot of the wrong directions I would say the world is going in right now, that humans are smart enough to do this kind of stuff, right? We can't manage, model, understand, control, create these really complex systems. And so things like the economy, the climate, things with trillions of inputs that, you know, we can't even really figure out what the weather is going to be like next week, let alone what the whole of the planet is going to do. We can't model a virus. We can't model the economy. We can't manage everything about the world. And this idea that we just need better government falls into that fallacy, that we just need smarter people making better decisions. I think what we need, and what Bitcoin will give us necessarily, because of the fact that it removes the ability for these people to reallocate our resources unilaterally with our consent, is that we will have governments that are more like service providers that can decide how heavy or light of a touch they're going to have into the area that they control. That's what a government is, really. It's a group of people who control an area with a monopoly over violence. And if a group of people have that, they can decide what that place is going to be like. And I think we're going to get to a point fairly soon where that's competitive, and we're eventually going to get to a point where smaller and smaller governments can provide smaller and smaller services, frankly, for less tax. And when we get to a point where a country like that has adopted Bitcoin not only as a savings tool, but as their actual unit of account for the economy, they're completely removed from the ability to print our money and spend it anymore. And we will necessarily at that point, I think, get to the place where they're competing on services, not on the grand scale. They're more competing on like how efficient and small can the services that we offer be, so that the fees or taxes to live where we live are as small as possible. And once the ability to print money as a form of taxation is gone, the actual taxes will be much clearer to people, and that competition can really come into the market. And we can see like, where is it actually advantageous to live? And the answer will be not what the taxes are, but what amount of Bitcoin does it cost me to live in this place, which is really like, how much of my time am I willing to devote to the collective goals of the area that I'm in? And I think if you put that in a rational sense, most people would say very little.
Yeah.
People feel like their resources are better kept themselves.
No, of course. And by the way, it's the theory of the sovereign individual that over time, information technologies in the book, right? Mass scale peer-to-peer communications, mass scale peer-to-peer money is going to make politics irrelevant, as people have the power to not only vote with their feet, but also their wallet. But I think what I meant to say is basically like, there is a transitionary period, and you can't have, and forgive my language, everyone, a total asshole that for whatever reason believes that they can somehow change the climate, even though we're like a rock orbiting, a giant fireball that's orbiting a giant black hole, traveling millions of miles per hour through the, space, whatever. And then, yeah, you have the hubris to think that you can fucking change the climate, bro. But always we have to raise the taxes, and you have to give up more power for that to happen, because if you don't do that, then we can't do it, right? But you can have the other side of that, where you have someone that creates a situation where it creates a situation where it creates an environment where entrepreneurs could thrive, and the men with guns don't get in the way, right? But that takes a little bit of humility. That takes a little bit of self. You have the ability to just not be an asshole with power, right? Because if not, then you're, thrown around by the guy with power that does think that he can change the climate and does think that he can central plan fucking everything, right? So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean that's what it comes down to, I guess, is it's the men with guns and how much how much power we let them have over our lives. And right now, I think a lot more people would object very vehemently if the power of the men with guns was implemented at the point of a gun on a daily basis. If the government showed up to your house every single day and took a percentage of the Bitcoin that you'd earned that day, people would not like that, I suspect. And right now, it's about as far away as possible from that, in that, it's not even really obvious to people that that value has been taken. I think we're getting to a point where inflation is starting to hit a lot more people. 5 years ago or so, it was a very kind of nebulous concept that people had heard of but didn't really necessarily care about. And nowadays, we're getting to the point where if you've been to the grocery store, if you're so poor that you have to do your own grocery shopping, and you buy things and you care about the price of things still, if you're not in the class of the mega wealthy, you've pretty much felt inflation at this point. Even if you're okay financially, the fact that a steak costs 3 times more than it did a couple of years ago it hurts every single time it happens. And so I think a lot more people are ready to hear that. And I think a lot more people are starting to come awake to the fact that this is how you're actually being taxed. And this is the fact that the government is taking your resources away from you with money printing. And as they inevitably have to print, like, they're all kind of in a race to the bottom at this point. They're all kind of trying to print their way out of their own debts. They're trying to print their way into their next term by spending more money. As they do more and more of that, inevitably, people are going to become more and more aware of the fact that this is how they're stealing from us. And that's the important piece, I think, is how many people are aware of the problem right now. And I'm seeing, like, I did a little mini speaking tour around small towns in Alberta about a month ago, and it was really awesome to see how many more people are kind of ready to hear about Bitcoin, because people have at least identified the problem now that Bitcoin solves.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, right? This idea that this is information narrative trench warfare. We have to win over the hearts and minds of individuals, and really waking them up to the reality that it's not left versus right, it's not liberal versus conservative. That's like a total effing psyop. It's the party of orange, the party of Bitcoin, peace, prosperity, opportunity, freedom, capitalism, non-central planning, versus the party of fiat, the party of green, nihilism, poverty, destruction, despair, war, all of that, right? And that's really what we got to wake up people to. Anyways, let's move on to the culture segment. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, the Orange Pill app. Stack friends who stack sats. The Orange Pill app is the Bitcoin social layer. Find local Bitcoiners, events, and merchants near you. It has a really clever geographical feature. So if you open up the app, it will show you Bitcoiners that are around you. So if you're traveling, if you're going to a new city, it also has a clever filtration system. So you will only find like-minded individuals, fellow Bitcoiners on the app. Join the 10,485 Bitcoiners that are currently on the Orange Pill app. You can scan the QR code or check the link in the video description. All right, everybody, let's hit the culture. Here we go.
The Daily Culture.
I want to give a shout out to our sponsor, KABOOMRACKS, the most trusted place to buy, sell, and host mining equipment. Check out the racks by scanning the QR code on your screen. It will take you directly to their Telegram marketplace, where you can connect with a member of their sales team. They make purchasing their products easy and transparent. You can also sell your mining equipment with KABOOMRACKS. Access their vast network of domestic and international customers when you sell your mining equipment with them. Also, check out their special sale that's going on right now. It's a special deal. They're offering instant hosting for S19K Pros 120 terahashes. You own the miner. This is not a hash rate contract. Your hash rate goes online after your payment is confirmed. So guys, if you want to start instant hosting, check out KABOOMRACKS today. This is where I personally buy my Bitcoin mining ASICs. Opti?
Let's go. All right. Well, guys, as you've been hearing all day, we got Dave Bradley, who is putting on the Bitcoin Rodeo. So Dave, what can people expect in Calgary? I don't have the dates here, so maybe for the audio listeners, the dates to the Bitcoin Rodeo, and what can they expect?
So the Bitcoin Rodeo is happening on July 2nd and 3rd here in Calgary, Alberta. It is a non-technical conference, so there's virtually no tech speak. And you should reload this page here. It's very important, I think. We've got, as you can see, JP Sears headlining. He's probably the most famous person who nobody knows his name. Like, I've had this conversation like 100 times since we got him signed up for this, and everybody knows who he is. Everybody's seen his comedy, but nobody knows his name. So he's a Bitcoiner. He's really awesome. He's going to be doing a Bitcoin comedy set, and we tend to have a really big focus on like making the whole show really fun. Nico was there last year. He was involved in a couple things really awesome. We did the Bitcoin elevator pitch competition that went really well, and oh, look at that. Front and center.
I'm on the website. Woo!
Yeah, and then next we've got the roast of BTC sessions. So that, I think, is going to be pretty amazing. We've got a good group of people that all know Ben pretty well, and Ben's like the nicest guy, so he's really hard to roast, but we're gonna do it. And I think overall, like I said, we've got a big focus on comedy, but we're also going to be talking a lot about what Bitcoin means in the real world. So we're not getting super deep on the macroeconomic topics. We don't really need to go to the depths of the discussion on hard money that we've all seen Saylor do a million times. We're more talking about like, how does Bitcoin affect real people in the real world on a day-to-day basis, and what does this mean? Very relevantly, we have a promo code as you're pulling this up here. Promo code is Simply.
Ooh.
All of the Simply viewers right now can use this promo code to get $69 off of a ticket to the Bitcoin Rodeo.
Oh, I'm gonna put that in the video description. Optic, you put that in the chat.
Okay.
And yeah, you can see we've got a great list of speakers here. We should have more of the agenda up here probably later this week, but it's going to be a fantastic amount of content. And then we also have our SAT market, or Saturday market, that we put on quarterly. This is Ben, BTC Sessions, and I have mostly organized this, but it's really become like a community grassroots thing where we get a bunch of different vendors out to kind of like a farmer's market, flea market type setting. And everyone sells whatever they normally sell in their business for Bitcoin. And so this will be the third one that we've done of these, and they've been really awesome. They're really showing that there's like a bit of an appetite for this kind of circular economy thing. It came from the idea that, we don't want to have the government's permission to transact in the things that we want most. And so we were like, this is started with Ben being like, I really need a rancher that will take Bitcoin. Right. And so he found a rancher. It turns out there's a lot of ranchers that will take Bitcoin because ranchers are naturally aligned with the ideals of Bitcoin. And so we ended up with a whole bunch of different vendors selling all kinds of good stuff. And it's a really good, feel good environment that the biggest benefit that we've gotten out of it is like all of the vendors meeting each other and all of the like hardcore people in the Bitcoin community getting to know all these vendors and having outlets for the stuff that we really want. And realistically, like, it's not super far-fetched that the day will come where if the province of Alberta, what is currently the province of Alberta, is still unlucky enough to be a part of Canada within the next few years, we may very well end up with a situation where they start telling us like, you can't eat more than X amount of red meat or something like that. And we're getting ahead of that. So we've now got a network of people who can produce meat and people who can buy meat, and we don't need the government's permission in between.
Yeah, and I think and Ben was telling me about it. What you guys are doing with I think the name is SAT market, right? And the importance of Bitcoin circular economies, right? And this kind of, I'm connecting this what we were talking about during the news segment, right? And it's such a different world. So people kind of have to unplug a little bit and really kind of think about their relationship with the state differently and their ability to become sovereign individuals because you can do that. If you can take care of a baby, if you can make a sandwich, you can take self-custody. You can do it. I promise you. But the circular economy concept and the SAP market is so important because you don't have to ask permission, right? You can just set up a market and everyone can transact, and you don't have to go through an intermediary, and governments love co-opting the intermediaries because there's only a handful of them, right? But if it's peer-to-peer, good luck, bro. That's what I got to say. Good luck. Like, you're seeing them freak the F out with just pure mass scale peer-to-peer communication. I don't think we've reached a critical mass with mass scale peer-to-peer money, especially in the West, right? But you're starting to see them kind of react like, no, like, I can't believe this, because it's their source of power. That's how these politicians are worth hundreds of millions of dollars off a government salary. This is how they're able to play God. This is how they're able to, invade foreign countries for a decade or 2 decades. This is how they're able to spend trillions of dollars more than they collect in tax revenue year after year. Just to give you a perspective, $1 trillion is more than the GDP of most countries on planet Earth. And they're just able to do that. Why? Because they have the godlike power of being able to create money. So I think that, as they freak out, they might become a little bit more tyrannical. I thought that this was the route that the United States was heading until, it became kind of this political issue. And then the Democrats kind of had to walk it back a little bit, even though I know for a fact they still want that, because they literally all voted for the central bank digital currency. So, yeah, I think we might get to a point that if you live in a specific jurisdiction, you might have to vote with your feet. Right. And Bitcoin empowers you in that sense, because it gives you the ability to take your money with you. If you write down your seed word, if you're in a pickle, you're going to memorize that shit. I promise you, bro. If your whole family's wealth and work and all that stuff depends on you memorizing 12 fucking words, you're going to memorize that shit. You're going to make your little kids memorize that too. Right. So, yeah, but this is the power that Bitcoin gives you, peer-to-peer money. And I think the circular economy and what you guys are doing with the SAP market is incredibly important. I kind of want to go back to the Bitcoin Rodeo. So we have I messed this up last time when I said it in Canada, so I'm going to say it right this time. JP Spears. And we have
you still said it wrong.
What did I said? That's what I said in Canada, didn't I?
Here,
okay.
Nico, it's right here.
What is it? Opti?
It's JP Sears.
I said Spears, didn't I?
Yeah.
JP Sears. You're right. Dave's right. No one knows his name. But I love this guy. I literally see him on YouTube and I watch his videos all the time. He's absolutely hilarious. So he's gonna do a whole set on Bitcoin stand up.
Yeah, and then he's also going to be a part of the roast of BTC sessions. as will you and I.
I'm so excited, man. I'm already I've been preparing. I usually, like, when I used to get nervous when I moderated panels, but this is going to be my first roast, so I'm a tad nervous. I have to prepare the jokes, because the jokes are going to be good if JP Sears is there, man. He's going to go all out on Ben.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing, because he's obviously the only professional stand-up comedian in the roster here that's going to be roasting Ben, but he probably also knows Ben the least of everyone else who's roasting him, right? And so it's like, I think we're going to have some good stuff. We're going to make it pretty short, but I think the fact that Netflix just came out with that roast of Tom Brady was really good timing, because there hasn't been like a really good roast like that in a long time, and I think it's kind of like brought the idea back to people's minds. And I think it's going to be hilarious.
Absolutely, man. I can't wait. And just like, because it's what you said, like, Ben's such a nice guy that, what are his facial, like, what's his facial expressions going to be like? Like, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? So I'm excited for that. Opti?
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. And Ben's just like any other roast. Ben's going to be roasting everyone back. So you better be ready for that.
Oh, I mean this sounds great. I can't wait. This is gonna be awesome. So it's like full Netflix, like Tom Brady roast, where everyone just kind of roasts everyone.
Yeah, we're gonna do the same structure, but we're gonna keep it a lot shorter because we're probably all a lot worse at it than all of the people that were that were doing the Tom Brady roast. So, but I think there's going to be we're going to keep it short enough that it can be punchy and it can generate some hilarious stuff. And I think the group we've got is pretty solid.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's one of my favorite conferences of the year, guys. I went last year. I had an incredible time. Calgary is an awesome place. Alberta, it's freedom loving. It's a beautiful city up there. I always say this, and every single Canadian that tells me this is like, but wait until the winter. So I went during the yeah, absolutely 100%. Yeah, it's gonna be absolutely awesome. I'm gonna bring up my wife. My baby's gonna come with me too. She's like 4 months old. It's gonna be her first country that she travels to outside of the US. She's gonna go to Canada. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's gonna be awesome.
Alberta.
Oh yeah, Alberta. We're manifesting the balkanization of Canada into actuality, right? It's not Canada, guys. It's Alberta. It's Alberta. It's a different country. It's a different oh man. I can't wait for the balkanization of these nation states. They're too big. They're too big. The only thing that's keeping them together is fiat money. If fiat wasn't a thing, they wouldn't. California and Texas, like they don't, they're two different vibes. Like Alberta and, not to be specific with any of the other provinces, like, let's just say that there's differences.
There are, yeah. I have to answer a question here from the chat. The SAT market, somebody asked where and when the SAT market is.
I was going to ask that next.
Yeah, the SAT market's the day before the Bitcoin Rodeo, so it's July 1st, which is also Canada Day. It's our national holiday, but we're doing our market on that day, and it is at the White Diamond Conference Center, which is in downtown Calgary. That's where we've done the last couple. It's a really nice little venue, and it's kind of like the kickoff to the whole Bitcoin Rodeo. And I should also mention, so like I said, the market is on the 1st, the conference is on the 2nd and the 3rd. The technical first day of the Calgary Stampede, the sneaky peek night, is the 4th. And so for anybody who's not familiar with the Calgary Stampede, it's like this giant sort of Western themed party that takes over the whole city. It's the world's largest rodeo. We have a massive fairgrounds and a bunch of dozens of country concerts in the city at the time, and it's a great time to come to Calgary. So somebody was like, it's the STD super spreader event, which might be true. So the whole town kind of turns into like slutty cowboys and cowgirls for like a week and a half.
I'm in.
If you haven't seen it, yeah.
It sounds like Miami and Halloween. So okay. All right. I'm excited. I didn't get a chance to go to the Stampede last year, but I'm super excited to go this year. Guys, go to bitcoinrodeo.com to get your tickets. You can use promo code simply. Like I said, one of the best Bitcoin events, Bitcoin conferences I've gone to. Whole lot of fun, incredibly funny. One of the highlight presentations last year. What was it, Dave? The guy that won was hilarious.
Yeah. So the funniest thing was last year we had the Bitcoin elevator pitch, which I think is really good. Like, and I kind of put that on because I feel like mine is really good and I wanted it to get better, but it didn't get better, but it was still hilarious. And you can actually see that it's up on the live section of BTC Sessions YouTube channel. Both days of the live stream are up there still. And I think it was the first day when we did the elevator pitch, and the guy who won was a guy named Colin Sullivan from a company called Mint Green, which does heating with Bitcoin miners based out of Vancouver. They're a pretty cool company. But his little bit was about, he basically recorded a phone message of himself calling himself, talking about how he doesn't like Bitcoin as the Bank of Canada, basically, and that was the winner. So, but there's a couple of great ones in there, and then we also did the Bad Twitter Takes award that Ben and Nico were judging, and that was pretty hilarious as well.
Dude, it was such a fun event. Great memories, and I can't wait to go back. Guys, go to bitcoinrodeo.com. Use promo Simply to get a $69 discount, and we'll see you in Calgary. Thank you guys, everyone, for the congratulations on the 1,000th episode. I think it was very fitting to have Dave on the 1,000th episode of Simply Bitcoin. And Dave, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
That's a good question. I mean, I think I got everything. Just come to the Bitcoin Rodeo. It's going to be the most fun Bitcoin conference of the year.
Absolutely. 100%. All right, everybody, go to bitcoinrodeo.com. Use promo code SIMPLY, $69 off. This is your Simply Bitcoin Live episode for May 29th, 2024. I'm your host, Nico. This is my legendary co-host, Optimus Fields. He survived an epic storm in Dallas, and of course, Dave Bradley. Dave Bradley is the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada. Don't you forget that, and go to his event, Bitcoin Rodeo. Anyways.
And I should point out, if anybody wants to know how I became the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada, you can find that on my website at bitcoinbrains.com.
Go to bitcoinbrains.com and you'll find out why Dave is the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada. I've written it down so I don't mess it up. Unlike JP Sears' name, which now I got it. Third time's the charm. Anyways, guys, love you all. If you guys enjoyed the show, smash the like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we provided you value. But the number one thing you could do to help push the peaceful Bitcoin revolution is spread the Bitcoin signal, spread Bitcoin media, love, art, music, go to conferences, win over the hearts and minds of individuals all around you. Anyways, love you all. We'll be back tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live.
Episode was brought to you by bitcoinwell.com, on a mission to enable independence.